What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to continue our coverage over the Reign of X era of X-Men comics, and we're actually going to wrap up the Cable series. Yes, you heard that right. This is basically the end to Cable, because Cable only ran for like 12 books, and of course, I think one or two of them were used for the X-Osaurus event. But either way, though, this is the end, where basically we have the return of old school Cable, but also you have old school Cable and new school Cable, yeah, I'm calling him new school, working together to basically stop Strife. Because remember, that has been the entire storyline so far, that Strife is back, and Strife is causing a lot of problems right now for Cable. And of course, Cable is scared that with Strife being back, that basically it could lead to more problems for COPPA down the road. And so of course, Cable is trying to stop Strife, but he might need the help of old school Cable to basically stop Strife. And so here are the final two chapters of the 2020 Cable series. I do hope you enjoy. Now, to begin today's video, we actually do pick up with Hope Summer. Now remember, Hope Summer is basically kind of like the daughter of Cable in a way, because when Hope Summer was born, she was the first mutant to be born after House of M. And of course, with the mutant race back then being at very low numbers, you had different groups trying to get her when she was a baby. But basically, Cable saved her and went to the future to raise her, and of course, adopted her. And so she's not his blood child, but either way, she still is his child. Now, with that being said, of course, with young Cable, it's still kind of like, yeah, he's my dad in a way. It's just a younger version of my dad. But either way, younger Cable came to Hope to ask Hope to basically help him revive the old Cable. Because when it comes to Hope Summers, she's part of the five mutants who are able to bring someone back to life. Of course, an X-Men character. Now again, it's not really them being brought back to life. It's more of like they made a clone body for you and they download your memories into that clone body. But of course, he did go to Hope Summers asking to bring back old school Cable. Now, we actually do pick up with Cable, and right now you have Cable basically talking to his parents, Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, the reason why I said basically right there is because technically Cable is the son of the clone of Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor. Cyclops is his father, but Madeline Pryor is really the mother of Cable. But of course, because Madeline is the clone of Jean Grey, of course, you have Cable look at Jean Grey as like, hey, you're basically my mother. But either way, though, you do have Cable, young Cable, telling his parents that they need to bring back old school Cable. Now, of course, at first, Cyclops says no, but then you have Jean Grey say, listen, I believe our son is right. We have no choice here. We have to do this. Let's bring back old school Cable. Now, with that being said, you can tell this story in this series is getting wrapped up very quickly because you do have Esme walk in. And remember, Esme is one of the clones of Emma Frost, the Stepford Cuckoos. And basically, Esme was kind of dating Cable along with the rest of the Stepford Cuckoos, even though one of them is also dating Kid Omega at the same time. I want to say it's Esme. Actually, it's probably Phoebe. They all have names. They're all confusing. Who cares? Either way, you do have one of them come to Cable and say that basically they're breaking up. And that's when you can tell this series is wrapping up very fast. Now, of course, Cable is very bothered by that. But of course, right after he says, can this day get any worse? It does. Because that is the moment you actually have a Space Knight from Galador appear. And remember, the Galadors are tied to the sword that Cable got at the very beginning of this series. Now, getting back to basically COPPA, we actually do pick up where you have the old school Cable being brought back to life. So yes, he is finally back in Marvel Comics, where most Cable fans wanted. He is finally back. Now, with that being said, of course, when he does come back, he does realize two things. One, the technovirus has not been taken out of his body. And remember, basically, the technovirus was kind of given to him by Apocalypse. And of course, when it comes to Cable, he can basically be a powerful psychic, but he has to use all of his abilities to basically keep that virus at bay, because if he doesn't, that virus can basically kill him. That is why Strife, the clone of Cable, is actually stronger than Cable, because Strife is a clone with no technovirus, which basically means he can use all the abilities he has to be a complete you-know-what. But either way, though, you do have Cable kind of coming back and saying two things, like, hey, Hope, it's nice to see you again. My daughter, I love you and care for you, blah, blah, blah. But you also have him say, hey, you messed up, New School Cable. Like, you basically messed up. You were over here chilling, having fun, being a cool kid, but then you realize you messed up by not keeping Strife away. And now Strife is back, and Strife could basically cause problems for us and them, the X-Men. And so you have Cable say, don't worry, I know how to find him. And you have both Cables basically leave to another safe house that Old School Cable had. Now, basically, you do have both Cables teleport over to the Graymaken 2. Of course, another ship that Cable has in space that's basically floating over the Earth that's right now kind of cloaked. But either way, though, you do have Old School Cable say, like, listen, I know what you did. I know why you killed me off. You felt like I was messing up too many timelines and that basically my mess ups were ruining time across the board. And so you thought by getting rid of me and then you having a fresh start could basically save all the different timelines that I have basically screwed up. But here's the thing, it's still gonna get messed up, because technically I did not mess up any timelines. Like, what I did was to benefit us, to actually help us, but to also help them down there, the current timeline right now. And so basically it's Cable saying, you thought what I did was wrong, but in reality, what I did was not wrong. That basically what I was doing before you killed me off was actually helping us out, but also helping the X-Men down the road in different points in time. Now, with all that being said, though, you do have basically Old School Cable say, listen, I know where Strife is at. That Strife is right now hiding out in some kind of dimension, some backwater dimension. So basically, I know how to get there. Now, this is really Old School Cable telling us that in the other books we saw before this one, every time we saw Old School Cable in some kind of other dimension, that was really him kind of before he died. That basically he was tracking Strife down before he died, and of course he was actually going to that old school dimension. Now, with all that being said, though, you do have Old School Cable saying, I'm going to take your sword of Galador, the one we got at the very beginning of this series, and I'm going to hunt down Strife. But I'm going to need your help, New School Cable, but also the help of other members of the X-Men to basically help us. And so you have the two Cables getting ready for war against Strife. Now, you do have Old School Cable actually go recruit Magic, which of course makes sense because one, Magic is one of the captains of the island, but on top of that, she is a complete you-know-what. Like, she can kick some butt. But either way, though, you do actually have Cable hand her a marker. Now, he does tell Magic that that marker is going to be needed down the road for something else. And so it's kind of like basically Marvel setting something up down the road. But either way, you do have Magic agree to go help Cable fight against Strife. Now, of course, you do have Cable, the young Cable, actually go pick up Domino, which makes sense because in the old days, Domino was part of X-Force along with Old School Cable. But you do have New School Cable and Domino actually going to pick up Deadpool, which again still makes sense because Deadpool and Cable are close friends in some kind of way. But either way, though, you do have all the Cable friends coming back together. And so you do have Domino and New School Cable and Deadpool on their way to basically link up with Old School Cable to get ready to fight against Strife. But then getting back over to Old School Cable, you do have Old School Cable make magic actually take him to that dimension that Strife is hiding out at. So that's really the only reason you had Old School Cable pick up magic, to basically have magic take him over to that dimension that Strife is hiding out at, because she has the ability to actually teleport over to that dimension. Now, you do have New School Cable actually go and find his parents, Cyclops and Jean Grey, because of course he wants their help as well. And also it makes sense to have them there because they are technically the parents of both Old School and New School Cable. But either way though, you do have the Space Knight of Galador actually come over to Cable asking for one particular request. Now, of course, with Cable being in a hurry, we do actually not get to learn what that request is at this moment. Instead, you have young Cable tell the Space Knight, listen, we're in a little hurry. I'll be right back with your sword, and then you can tell me your request. But for right now, I gotta go. Now, you do have New School Cable basically go get one more person, and that person is Esme, because Cable knows after this big battle against Strife that basically Old School Cable is going to replace him. That New School Cable is going to go back in the time stream and do different things across time that is basically going to lead up to him becoming Old School Cable. But of course, he wants to make sure that after this battle, after this war against Strife, and right before he leaves, that he's basically able to make sure that him and Esme are left on good terms. And so you do have New School Cable being able to actually make up with Esme. And so you do have her kiss her. It's kind of like, okay, everything is good to go. Let's go fight against Strife and finally stop this man once and for all. Now, before they leave, you do have two more characters also joining the battle, which is Rachel Summers, the daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey from an alternate timeline, and Hope Summers, the daughter of Cable. And so right now, you really have most of the Summers family coming together to fight against Strife. The reason why I say most is because we don't have Havoc here, and we also don't have Gabriel Summers either. It's really most of the Cyclops family drama right now. But either way, though, you do have them all coming together and getting ready to join Old School Cable to fight against Strife. Now, of course, we actually do pick up with the main bad guy of the book, and that is Strife himself. And basically right now, you have Strife kind of really just getting ready to do a ritual. Because remember, throughout this entire series, you had Strife going around kidnapping babies. Now, of course, he wanted 10 babies, but only got 5. And so, of course, he cloned those 5 babies to make 10 babies. Because what he is trying to do is basically do a ritual to take him and his army of demons from this dimension to basically invade the earth, to destroy the earth. Because basically, he could do that. He could technically possibly actually take over the earth. I mean, not really, because you have the Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, but he will probably put up a good fight though. But either way though, this is him right now trying to complete the ritual so that he'll be able to actually invade the earth with these armies of demons. But of course, right when he's about to do the ritual, like actually kill off a baby, well, that is the moment you have Old School Cable jumping in and getting ready to fight against Strife one more time. Now, when we actually jump into the next chapter, the last chapter of the Cable series, we actually do pick up with Strife beating down on Cable. He's like, listen, did you actually think you can just pop right in and actually defeat me? Like, this is your bright idea? Because this is dumb. Like, you're not going to be able to do anything at all to me, Cable. Like, come on. It's Strife just beating down on Old School Cable. But luckily for Old School Cable, you do have New School Cable actually appear. Now, when New School Cable actually does appear, of course, he's along with Cyclops. Now, Strife thinks like, oh, you brought your father here as well? Cool. I get to kill old school Cable, new school Cable, and y'all dad. So let's go ahead and go. But of course, Strife has no idea that basically new school Cable had brought some help. And so we're about to get into the big battle between Strife and the Summers family. And of course, that is the moment where you basically have the rest of the Summers family actually appear. They appear and they're ready to go. You have Domino and Deadpool there as well, but of course, like I said, it's the Summers family all here together to fight against Strife, to hopefully stop him one more time. But of course, right after the battle actually starts, now you do have Esme kind of thinking that she could basically stop Strife by herself. I don't know, because Homegirl does walk up to Strife and she does use her abilities, her psychic abilities, to kind of read the mind of Strife, but kind of hoping that maybe she'll be able to actually stop Strife. Now, of course, this leads into a very big moment for Esme, because for Esme, she always wanted to know why Cable and Strife are always fighting. And of course, it all began with Apocalypse, because remember, Apocalypse was the one who did technically clone Cable, who made Strife. And so with all that being said, you kind of had this endless war begin because of Apocalypse, that Cable and Strife are basically destined to fight against one another forever, across all time. And there are points where Cable wins. There are points where Strife wins. But either way, they are stuck in an endless war forever. And so no matter what, they're going to be fighting. And it's all because of Apocalypse. Now, you do have Strife being able to kind of force Esme out of his mind. Now, of course, this leads into what I say bad timing. And what I mean is that basically you have young Cable ask Esme, what did she see in him when they started dating? And of course, to me, I say bad timing because they're right now in the middle of a war. Like, why are you going to ask with that question now, my dude? But either way, you do have young Cable ask Esme, what did she see in him when they started dating? And of course, you have Esme tell Cable the truth, that basically at first, she was actually watching over him because he was a mission. That when he first popped up, Cyclops was scared about the idea that he was not actually a younger version of Cable. To Cyclops, he feared that young Cable could have been possibly a younger version of Strife. And so with that, he was kind of like asking Emma Frost to have the Stepford Cuckoos watch over young Cable to make sure he wasn't a young Strife. And of course, over time, we found out he was not young Strife, he was young Cable. And so Esme said at first, you were a mission. But then I realized you're someone I care for and basically wanted to date. And so with that, you have Esme kind of realizing that she cares for Cable. And so with that, you have Esme get back up and she joins the battle. And you also have Jean Grey kind of like, hey, we got to help our men out to fight against Strife. So let's go ahead and work together. And so, of course, it does lead into the Summers family working together to fight against Strife. And so basically right after that, you do have the old school Cable and new school Cable work together to basically defeat Strife. And of course, when they get to Strife, his mind's right now still being affected by Esme and Jean Grey. And so, of course, with his mind being affected by Jean Grey and Esme, that gives our Cables, yes, our Cables, to basically shoot Strife right in the chest. So Homeboy is definitely dead. But of course, the problem is though, Strife had made clones of himself in the future. So basically, with the death of this Strife, another one is going to pop up sooner or later in a different time. It's just for right now, the X-Men and Cables can relax. But of course, they have to get back out there to fight the big war against Strife. And so, of course, it's old school Cable telling us to make sure that their whole existence actually happened. New school Cable has to go back into the future, meaning that he has to say goodbye to Jean Grey and Cyclops and Esme and everyone else. And so when it comes to young Cyclops, he was really hoping that he can have young Cable to kind of actually have the ability to be a father, to watch young Cable grow up. But the problem is, though, young Cable has to go into the future to fight the big war so that old Cable can actually exist to kind of fight against Strife throughout time. And so, of course, this is us saying goodbye to New School Cable. Now, we actually do learn what the last Space Knights of Galador wanted, and basically he wanted to die on a no-name planet. He wanted the Cables to use the Sword of Galador as a way to kind of kill him off, but kind of use him as a way to restart the race of the Galador Space Knights. And so even though he was turned into a flower, like he was basically turned into a flower and planted in the ground of this no-name planet, the goal is that one day in the far future, we could see the revival of the Space Knights down the road. And so it's kind of like wrapping up that loose end right there. But we also see Esme and young Cable saying goodbye to one another, where you basically do have young Cable giving Esme a go-away present. Like, this is it. I'm not going to see you anymore. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to say I love you, but here's this gift. And I pray that you hold on to this gift because I'm hoping that one day down the road, I can come back to you and we continue our relationship. Now, you do have young Cable also say goodbye to Cyclops and Jean Grey, and this was probably, I say, harder for Cyclops because, again, Cyclops wanted that chance to actually watch Cable grow, like actually raise Cable up, but of course he has to say goodbye to Cable all over again and kind of be with the old Cable all over again. So this is Cyclops saying goodbye to his son, technically the second time. But either way, though, you do have young Cable tell us that he used a marker, basically a way to say like, hey, you owe me one, to kind of have Logan kind of help Cyclops and Jean Grey kind of get through the process of saying goodbye, because Logan is known for having a lot of bad goodbyes in his past. And so Logan would know how to help Cyclops and Jean Grey actually work through it. Now, you do have young Cable go meet up with old Cable, and this is really the goodbye. Like, this is young Cable going back into the time stream to basically fight a war against Strife, but also other enemies across the time stream. And so, of course, it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to say goodbye now, but I do have one question. Does Krakoa live on? Like, that's a big question, because with young Cable and old Cable being from the future, the question is, does basically Krakoa live? Like, how long does it say alive? Is it actually successful? Like, what happens with Krakoa? But you have old Cable saying, I cannot tell you anything about the future because that could risk the ending of the future. And so with that being said, you have old Cable telling young Cable, the only thing I can tell you is that you and I are going to fight to make sure it does live on. But for right now, I cannot tell you if it is going to be successful or not. And so then you have young Cable actually leave. Now, we do get this small little glimpse where basically we see that in the future, Esme and Cable are a couple. Like, basically, old Cable has a wife or girlfriend, and that person is Esme. And so we do know that in the future, they are able to actually get back together and actually be a couple again, which is kind of great to see because kind of like, at least we now know they do have a happy ending. Now, the way this story ends is kind of interesting. And what I mean by that is basically remember that the way this entire series kicked off is that babies were being kidnapped. Now, remember, Strife only kidnapped 5 babies, but he needed 10 to complete his ritual. And so some families are getting not one baby back. Instead, they're getting 2 babies back. Now, the thing is, though, the family we saw at the very beginning of this series, one of their babies has an eye just like Cable, meaning that Strife possibly cloned a baby version of himself, and now this family is raising another Cable, which could technically cause some problems for the time stream down the road. But with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.